There's a moment that doesn't arrive with anger. It doesn't come after failure. It doesn't even feel dramatic. It arrives quietly, when you realize the effort you put in is no longer noticed. Not because it isn't valuable, but because it has become expected. You still deliver. Things still work. People still rely on you. But the recognition never comes. Not praise, not acknowledgement, not even resistance. Just silence and the unspoken assumption that you will continue. This is the moment most men misunderstand. They think this is where bitterness begins. But for some men, this is where something else happens. Something colder, quieter, more permanent. The external world doesn't punish competence. It absorbs it. That's what happened to Belisarius. In the 6th century, the Byzantine Empire was stretched thin, borders collapsing, authority weakening, enemies pressing in from every side. Belisarius was the general sent where others failed, not because he was favored, because he was reliable. And every time he was sent, the same thing happened. He won against larger armies with fewer resources, often without the reinforcements he was promised. Cities were reclaimed, crises stabilized, disasters quietly neutralized. From the outside, it looked like trust. From inside the system, it was something else. His success made him invisible. The more reliable he became, the less explanation he was given. The more pressure he absorbed, the less credit that followed. Not because the emperor despised him, but because the system adjusted. Victory stopped being exceptional. It became the baseline. And once something becomes baseline, it stops being acknowledged. Belisarius didn't receive parades after each campaign. He received new assignments, harder ones, with fewer resources, under closer scrutiny. Because when something works consistently, systems don't protect it. They consume it. And that's the external consequence most men don't anticipate. You don't get punished for being reliable. You get assigned permanence. The expectation sets in quietly. You'll handle it. You always do. At first, this feels like trust. Then like responsibility. Then like weight. And eventually something internal shifts. You stop expecting recognition. Not because you've become cynical, because expectation no longer makes sense. You notice that praise was never the fuel. It was the signal. The signal that effort was still being seen. And when that signal disappears, you're left with a choice no one names. Continue, knowing nothing will be said, or change, knowing nothing will be celebrated. Belisarius faced this too. Despite his victories, he was repeatedly sidelined, stripped of command, recalled, reassigned. Not as punishment, but as adjustment. The empire had learned something dangerous. He would act without reward, which meant it no longer had to offer one. That realization alters judgment. You become less expressive, not from resentment, but efficiency. You stop explaining yourself, because explanation no longer changes outcomes. You begin to conserve energy, not because you're tired, but because you're precise. Effort becomes conditionally internally, even if it looks unconditional from the outside. This is where most men grow quiet in a different way. Not withdrawn, not defeated, just internally unmoved by acknowledgement they no longer expect. And this is the cost few people talk about. When recognition dies, so does the illusion that effort will be met halfway. What remains is a colder clarity. You either act because it aligns with who you are, or you stop. Not to protest, not to be noticed, but because effort without meaning corrodes judgment over time. Belisarius eventually faded from public memory, not because he failed, but because systems remember outcomes, not carriers. And men learn this lesson the same way. Quietly, when no one thanks you, when no one resists you, when no one notices that the work is still being done. This isn't bitterness, it's calibration. A moment when you decide whether your actions are powered by expectation or by something that doesn't require recognition to exist. Once that decision is made, something changes permanently. You no longer wait for acknowledgement. You no longer orient yourself towards applause. You choose what you will carry and what you will no longer give away for free. Not because you're owed something, but because you finally understand the cost of being endlessly reliable.